and a very good evening to you. I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend, and for anybody in the States, I hope your Thanksgiving was very relaxing and you enjoyed time with friends and family. So I know I'm not the only one that's had a very long and somewhat complex relationship with colognes and aftershaves. I remember growing up in the primarily the 80s, uh, really discovering wearing cologne, trying to impress the girls, drowning myself in all different scents, starting with I think starting with what our parents or our fathers were wearing, or elder men in our families. And I remember in the UK, it was often Brute, a very strong smelling aftershave, and gradually experimenting with other brands. And I think those that were advertising the most. I remember, quite clearly loving Tabac, and then graduating to Dracar Noir. And then a few years later on, Calvin Klein's Eternity for Men, Davidoff Cool Water. I've always worn cologne, and one thing I find about the more commercial brands is that they are incredibly strong smelling, and too much can easily overpower a room. We've all been in rooms, meetings, lifts, elevators with people wearing way too much cologne. And this is a case where definitely less is more. But yeah, I've always worn cologne, and it's part of my morning routine. That and I don't feel fully dressed unless I'm putting some on. Even working, if I'm working from home, if I'm not going anywhere, putting some cologne on after a shave, I feel ready for the day. A couple of years ago, everything changed for me a couple of years ago in terms of colognes. I still do have a couple of more commercial brands I do like to wear on occasion. Um, More in the winter time, they're heavier. Armani Code, for example. But a couple of years ago, I did change significantly the colognes I'm wearing, and now I would say I'm primarily loyal or exclusive to one brand or one portfolio of colognes, and that would be Floris of London. If you haven't heard of Floris, they don't really advertise in the mainstream media much. You won't see them in magazines. It's if you know, you know. Floris is one of the British heritage brands, started in 1730, I believe, by Juan Floris. Initially started off selling a range of gentlemen's accessories and received the first royal warrant in 1820 from King George the Fourth for combs. But this was a time in London when everybody was wearing perfume and cologne. It must have just absolutely reeked, horses everywhere, droppings everywhere. And it was a time too when people believed if you wore a scent, if you wore flowers, the smell would keep off disease. It would keep disease away. What's the nursery rhyme? Nursery rhyme: ring a ring of roses, pocket full of posies. Um, harks back to that belief. So Flores became a very popular brand very early on, and they are incredible amongst people who do look for alternatives to the more commercial products. Floris is incredibly highly regarded. They still have the royal warrant bestowed upon them by Queen Elizabeth, and I believe that warrant will stay in place for a couple more years. I'm not sure if King Charles will reissue the warrant. Walking into the Floris store, they're located on Jermyn Street, so they're just across the street from John Lobb, the shoemaker, um, a couple of doors away from Taylors of Old Bond Street, Turnbull and Asser, and just a few doors away from Davidoff of London, which is on the corner of Jermyn Street and St James's. You won't walk into Floris. It's not walking into a department store perfume counter where there's an overwhelming smell. It's very subdued. All of the bottles are exactly the same for men and for women. Very just with a very simple, plain label on the front with the name of the cologne. And there are absolutely dozens to choose from. What they do have a very interesting service where you can get a bespoke cologne made. They have two levels of service. The first is where you'll meet with a perfumer for about 2 hours, and they'll bring out all of the base notes, and then the middle and upper notes, and everything is mixed together. So you'll sample each one, and put a few samples together until you find a scent that you absolutely love. It's then bottled in the same bottle. It'll be laser engraved with your name, and a handwritten label in the same style will be affixed to the bottle. I haven't done that yet, but that's one of my bucket list items, is that next time in London to go to Floris to set up an appointment and have a bespoke custom made cologne made. So until then, there are certain colognes in the Floris portfolio I absolutely love. The first one is Turnbull and Asser 7172. Turnbull and Asser, the famous shirt maker, I believe the king still gets his shirts made there. They're just a few doors away from Floris. And I think it was 2016, they entered into a partnership where they created this specifically for Turnbull and Asser. And then it was introduced into the Floris collection. So there's a few notes about the Turnbull and Asser: jasmine, lavender with orris and oud. I'm not an expert in the smells. I like what I like. And like all of the Floris collection, you'll put it on. It does fade fairly quickly, leaving some very, very subtle notes behind. You will not overpower anybody with this. It's a very subtle scent. One interesting thing, if you're wearing Eternity for Men, you're wearing Drakkar Noir, everybody will recognize that scent. They are so prevalent in the market. A lot of people use them that, the scent of Drakkar Noir is unmistakable. You can smell it from a mile away. If you're wearing anything from Floris, nobody will know what you're wearing except for you're wearing something rather special. I love the scent of the Turnbull and Asser, the 7172. That's the street number of Turnbull and Asser on Jermyn Street. Very it almost does remind you of walking into a fine clothing store. Woody, but it's fresh. There's an element of, you get sandalwood in this as well. I'm not a huge sandalwood fan, but I find that there's sandalwood in a lot of the Floris colognes that work. But yeah, so the 71, you can tell it's going down fairly quickly, so I have to pick up more next time. Next is number 89. Now, number 89, it is rather special. It's the street number of Floris on Jermyn Street, but 89 was the preferred cologne of Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond novels. It was introduced in 1951, and although we're talking 70-something years, it's still as relevant today as it was then. Orange, and so I'm reading from the notes here: orange and bergamot with lavender and neroli, with a base of vetiver, cedarwood, and sandalwood. It's absolutely phenomenal. Again, it's one of those smells you will not find in the mass market, but you put this on, people will recognize it. You walk into a room, it just leaves a very, very subtle scent behind you. So this was, Ian Fleming's favorite cologne, but I'll get back to this in just one quick second, because this does segue into something rather special. Another brand I like, another name I like is their Elite. Elite is much fresher. It's more citrusy, The others tend to be a little bit more earthy. This is very citrusy, very fresh. But this is good. I think good for any time of the year. I do find that the others, actually, the Turnbull and Nasser is good for any time of the year. I do find the other ones, the 89 and the other one I'll be talking about in a second, I think is better for the summertime. But I find Elite, personally, I find Elite great for any time of the year. It is very fresh, but it does have a very almost a spicy undertone to it. So Ian Fleming was a huge fan of Floris. He lived in the St James's district, and a lot of he was member of a few clubs there, and Floris was his perfumer of choice, and in fact he actually mentions Floris in a few of his books. Diamonds Are Forever and Dr. No, he makes reference to Floris. So there's always been a connection between Floris and James Bond. I do not believe he specifies which cologne James Bond wore, but it's been interpreted that because Ian Fleming was a huge fan and that he references Floris in his books, that James Bond would, of course, have worn Floris. So I believe it was 2022, was the 60th anniversary of the first James Bond film, and as a result of that, was it the first James Bond film or the first James Bond book? I'll check. But it was the 60th anniversary of James Bond, and as a result, Floris decided to launch their newest addition to the family, 007. So it's not the cologne James Bond wore, but it's the one we like to associate with James Bond. It's one of the more it's incredibly popular. It is price point. It is higher than Elite or 89 or the 71, 72, but it's incredibly. The smell of this is something else. So I've got a couple more details about this. So I think any perfumer would talk about the top notes, heart notes, and base notes. So the base notes that underline the 007: amber, sandalwood, oak, moss, and musk. And you do get the muskiness. You definitely smell the muskiness. Then with rosemary, rose, and carnation as the heart notes. And the top notes, those that you'll smell immediately, the bergamot, sweet orange, juniper, and geranium. But you do get the bergamot, the Earl Grey type smell. But again, if I think overall you're getting woody, spicy, and very citrusy with this one. But you can't compare this to anything else on the market. It's absolutely wonderful. So this will be one that I will be keeping in the collection, most definitely. I did have another one, the JF, the Juan Floris. I did gift that to my father actually, and another incredible smell. So I don't know how many members of the portfolio there are, but there are literally dozens. A lot of them are unisex for men and for women. I haven't tried any of the unisex scents yet. I've always just stuck with those for men. But yeah, the amazing thing about this is that very understated packaging, just very classy looking. There's scents that nobody else will recognize, and very classic smells. With scents such as Paco Rabanne's Millionaire. They're very the smells for today. They're fashions. They're trends. But these are classics. They'll be as relevant in 20, 30, 40 years as they were 40 years ago. So if you haven't checked out Floris, definitely do so. You don't have to go to London into the Floris store. I always like to go in. It's just participating in that whole heritage experience. You can find Floris a lot online. There are a few online retailers. There's one in Canada actually that often has sales where you can buy them for a lot less than you'll find them for in the store. But if you are in London and you have the opportunity to head down to Jermyn Street, definitely pop into Floris. To round up the experience, next to just a couple of steps away from Floris, you'll find Taylor's of Old Bond Street, a completely different price point than Floris, but again, a wonderful lineup of shaving cream, shaving soap, shaving accessories. That's one of my ports of call. And around the corner from there, you'll have the Davidoff store if you want to pick up a cigar. So you can pretty much find everything, for a gentleman, all in one short street. But Juan Floris, 89 Jermyn Street, London, worth checking out. I absolutely love them, and I'm sure that if you try it, you'll love it too. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.